In 1932, a nation went to war. It deployed soldiers, machine guns, and thousands of rounds of ammunition against a determined and elusive enemy. That enemy was a large, flightless bird. And almost unbelievably, the birds won. This is the strange and very real story of the Great Emu War. Welcome to Curio Hour, where we uncover the strange, the unsolved, and the unforgettable. Today's story: the Great Emu War. Our story takes place in Western Australia in the years after the First World War. To help its returning veterans, the government had given many of them remote plots of land out in the dry, harsh interior. These soldier settlers were encouraged to grow wheat. And after years of brutal, back-breaking work, they finally had crops in the ground. But the early 1930s were not kind. The Great Depression had crushed wheat prices, and the farmers were already struggling to survive. And then things got worse. Much worse. As the weather warmed, an enormous number of emus began to migrate inland toward the coast in search of water and food. An emu is no small bird. It stands nearly 6 feet tall, can run at 30 miles an hour, and is tougher than it looks. And they did not arrive in the dozens or the hundreds. They came in the tens of thousands. To the migrating emus, the farmers' green wheat fields looked like paradise. They moved in and began to feast. They trampled the crops. They ate the wheat. And they smashed through the fences, leaving gaps that let rabbits pour in to finish whatever the emus had missed. The farmers were desperate. Their livelihoods were being devoured, bird by bird. And so they turned to the government with an unusual request. Many of these men were former soldiers, and they knew exactly what could mow down a charging enemy: machine guns. Remarkably, the Minister of Defense agreed. And so, in November of 1932, the Australian military went to war against the emus. The operation was placed under the command of Major Meredith, with 2 soldiers, 2 light machine guns, and 10,000 rounds of ammunition. Their mission seemed simple: find the emus and deal with them. The emus, of course, had other ideas. The first attempt came quickly. A group of around 50 emus was spotted, and the soldiers opened fire. But the birds were out of range. And the moment the guns started, the emus did something no enemy was supposed to do. They scattered in every direction. The great flock split into countless small groups, sprinting across the open plain, impossible to pin down. It turned out that emus were fast, agile, and astonishingly hard to hit. And there was something else. The birds seemed almost impossible to bring down. Even when struck, the emus would simply keep running. Their large bodies seemed to shrug off the bullets entirely. The soldiers later remarked that the birds were like armored tanks. They could take a hit and just keep going. Day after day, the men tried, and day after day, the emus outmaneuvered them. The birds even seemed to grow wise to the soldiers. Some observers claimed the flocks had posted lookouts, large males who would watch for danger and warn the others to flee. The army was, quite literally, being outwitted by birds. In a final, desperate bid, the soldiers tried a new tactic. They mounted one of the machine guns onto the back of a truck. The plan was to chase the emus down and fire from the moving vehicle. But the emus were faster than the truck, and the ground was so rough that the ride was far too bumpy to aim or fire at anything at all. At one point, an emu reportedly got tangled in the vehicle's steering, causing the truck to crash into a fence. It was, by any honest measure, a complete disaster. After weeks of effort, the results were embarrassing. The soldiers had fired thousands upon thousands of rounds and had very little to show for it. The emu population was barely dented, and the press had a field day. Stories spread of the war the army could not win. Questions were even raised in Parliament, and quietly the operation was called off. The commanding officer, looking back, offered a grudging tribute to his feathered foes. "If we had a military division with the bullet-carrying capacity of these birds," he said, "it could face any army in the world." The farmers, in the end, got no real relief from the army. The emus had, against all odds, prevailed. In the years that followed, the government gave up on soldiers and simply paid a bounty for emus instead. It worked far better than any machine gun ever had. But the legend was already born. The time a modern army with machine guns marched out to fight an enemy of birds, and came home defeated. The Great Emu War, forever remembered as the conflict that proved you should never, ever underestimate a very large, very stubborn bird.